Hello, I'm Raider Pilot Steve, and this is my review of the Shuttleworth Wings and Wheels Airshow 2026. This is my first of several visits to the Shuttleworth collection at Old Warden Aerodrome this season. The show's main theme was everything wings and wheels, and featured a fantastic gathering of flying display aircraft, as well as a large gathering of different eras of cars. This review will focus on the flying display and visiting aircraft. Several small sub-themes were also featured during the flying programme, including the 80th and 90th anniversaries of the Chipmunk and Spitfire respectively, alongside the Rolls-Royce engine. The weather conditions on the day were very sunny, hot, with barely any breeze until later on in the day. I can't talk about this event without mentioning the incident that occurred near the end of the show, so I will mention it now. This incident involved the Shuttleworth Collection's Row 4 triplane replica, which developed a technical issue shortly after takeoff, and as a result ended up in a tree down near the main entranceway of the site. Emergency services attended the scene quickly in the recovery of the pilot, who was thankfully relatively unharmed and was checked out at hospital. The aircraft suffered substantial damage, but hopefully might be able to be restored soon. But most importantly, the pilot was okay. There were two notable aircraft that were briefly brought outside the museum hangars whilst the ground crew reshuffled some display aircraft. First was David Bremner's Bristol Scout C replica, alongside an Avro 504K belonging to Tom Harris. The engineering hangar was also playing host to a selection of Shuttleworth Collection aircraft awaiting restoration works and maintenance, including the English Electric Wren without its wings, the Hawker Hind, which will hopefully be returning to the display circuit this year after a lengthy restoration, the Percival E2H Mughal, which still has a way to go before it flies again, and finally the de Havilland D860 Cirrus Moth, which was tucked away right at the back of the hangar. Visitors once again had the opportunity to take flight in a vintage aircraft during their time at the show. This time there were 3 different aircraft offering this service, including the de Havilland DH-82A Tiger Moth 2 from the Cambridge Flying Group based here at Old Warden, the de Havilland DH-89A Dragon Rapide, operated by Scalonia Airways based at Membury Airfield, and finally the CCF T6H Harvard Mark IV-M Wacky Wabbit, owned by T6 Harvard Limited, based at Duxford Aerodrome. There was also a decent number of visiting aircraft that were viewable along the main flight line, including an Aeropro Eurofox 912 IS, an Aerostyle Breezer M400, a Boeing Stearman PT-17 Cadet in the classic blue and yellow United States Army Air Corps scheme, a de Havilland Canada DHC-1 Chipmunk T10 in Army Air Corps colours, a Grob G109B, a Yodel DR-1050M replica, a Luscombe 8E Silvair Deluxe, a Piper PA-12 Supercruiser, a Striking Pitts S1S Special, and a Vans RV7. A small number of aircraft were unable to display for various reasons. The Shuttleworth Collection's RAF SE-5A was unable to join the World War I segment due to technical issues. The Blackburn Monoplane Type D, Bristol Boxkite Replica, and Bristol M1C Replica didn't display due to the aforementioned incident with the Row 4 triplane replica. Now onto the flying display, which was opened by a special tribute to Richard Shuttleworth, who was a motorist, racer, aviator and keen collector of veteran cars and aircraft. He was tragically killed in an RAF training exercise when the ferry battle he was piloting crashed into a hillside in the early hours of the 2nd of August 1940. His collection of vehicles and aircraft formed the main core of the Shuttleworth collection we have today, some of which are still flying today. First up was the collection Sopwith Pup, which was acquired by Richard in 1931 as a 2-seater Dove before converting it to a single-seater pup. It is now painted to represent an aircraft that served aboard HMS Manxman. It was soon joined in the air by the Collection's Desalter Mark I and Comper CLA-7 Swift, which performed a series of loose formation passes, whilst the pup was put through its paces. The Desalter was bought by Richard in 1935 and is now painted in its original National Flying Services livery. This particular Swift wasn't ever owned by Richard, but represents the examples he did own during his life. Next was the first of two gliding segments. The Shuttleworth Collection's Elliott's primary Eon was towed up by the Piper PA-18-150 Super Cub, probably the busiest aircraft of the show. Whilst the glider and tug were climbing to height, the Collection's Percival P-56 Provost T1 put on a lovely aerobatic display as well as some low passes. The Eon was then released from the Super Cub and made a series of gentle circuits as it made its way back down to land. The Provost then returned to finish its display. This Provost is currently the only airworthy example in the UK and possibly Europe. One of the major aviation celebrations of the 2026 season was the 80th anniversary of the de Havilland Canada DHC-1 Chipmunk, and this was marked with a special flying display. First up was the T-10 owned by the Henlow Chipmunk Group, one of the most famous chipmunks, having been used to teach several members of the royal family to fly, including King Charles III. The Red Chippy flew a series of low passes before it was joined by the Shuttleworth Collection's T-10 and a Royal Canadian Air Force scheme, which descended after performing some aerobatics. The pair flew a series of formation passes before they were joined by David Petter's Portuguese-built T-20, after it also descended after some high aerobatics. The free ship then flew a series of formation passes, whilst the Navy Wings Heritage Flight's T-10 put on some aerobatics of its own, whilst getting closer to form up with the other three aircraft. The quartet then concluded the display with a formation pass and a brief tail chase. This was a surprisingly inventive routine compared to what you would normally expect, and was certainly one of the highlights of the day. Following the Chipmunks was a pair of twin-engine transport aircraft. Leading the duo was the Shuttleworth Collection's Avro Anson 19, alongside Philip Meeson's de Havilland DH-89A Dragon Rapide. The pair flew in formation for a series of passes before performing their own solo displays. This Anson is the only Anson 19 in the world that is airworthy and is currently painted in an RAF Coningsby station flight scheme, whilst the Rapide has returned to the display circuit after a lengthy overhaul and still retains its British European Airways livery. Special Operations was the theme of the next display and featured two consecutive displays by two very different aircraft. Up first was the Shuttleworth Collection's Polikarpov PO2, a simply designed utility biplane which was produced in large numbers in the Soviet Union and used for all manner of roles. Next was the Shuttleworth Collection's Westland Lysander Mark IIIA, a British Army Cooperation aircraft which would later be used to drop off and pick up agents in occupied Europe. Barnstorming is a regular crowd favourite at Shuttleworth airshows, and this event was no exception. This segment consisted of an interesting mix of vintage aircraft from the Shuttleworth Collection, including the Southern Martlet, the Parnell Elf, the Piper Super Cub, and the Miles Magister. First was the flower bombing section, which saw the pilots attempt to throw a bag of flour at a target on the ground, the key word being attempt. After this was the limbo flying, where the pilots attempted to fly under two banner gates held up by some brave volunteers. The pilots had a lot more success with this one. The display was concluded with all four aircraft performing a series of gentle circuits. This was a very entertaining spectacle and using a combination of collection aircraft that don't often fly together. We then moved on to trainers used by the United States Navy, with two consecutive displays which were both making their UK airshow debuts. First was Mark Blockland's Ryan PT-22 Recruit, which performed a series of gentle passes. I personally haven't seen a PT-22 in the air since 2013, so this was quite special to see. This was followed by the Naval Air Factory N3N3 Canary, operated by Peril Displays, which gave a very spirited performance. The last time an N3N was displayed at a UK show was at least 20 years ago, and this is one of only 2 examples currently in the UK. The next display paid tribute to Rolls-Royce, the world-famous aero engine manufacturer. This saw 2 different eras of aviation from the Shuttleworth collection, the Bristol F-2B fighter and the Supermarine Spitfire LF-5C, which are powered by the Rolls-Royce Falcon 3 and Rolls-Royce Merlin 46 respectively. Each aircraft's performance meant that formation flying was not possible, but they did share the airspace close together at a few points during this display. Both fighters then went on to perform their own consecutive solo displays, with the Spitfire being particularly good, and highly appropriate with this season marking the 90th anniversary of the Spitfire's first flight. The Rolls-Royce theme would be touched on later in the flying programme. Now for a change of pace, with the second gliding section of the show. This had the Shuttleworth Collection's Piper Super Cub take to the air for the 3rd time to tow up the Forvell AV36. Whilst the glider was towed to height, the collection's Miles M2L Hawkspeed 6 racing aircraft put on a very sleek display. The Forvell was then released and proceeded to perform some graceful aerobatics as it descended towards the ground. The Hawkspeed 6 then returned to conclude its own display. The show also featured a rotary element in the form of the Gazelle Squadron, who provided 2 of their Westland Gazelle helicopters. This included the HT-2 in the blue and white livery from its time with the Empire Test Pilot School and Quinetic, as well as the HT-3 in the colours of No. 7 Squadron, with whom it once served for a short time. The pair flew a wonderful synchronised display, which included several crossovers and hovering manoeuvres, whilst filling the air with that distinctive gazelle whine. Shifting back to aviation of the First World War, with a trio of types representing some of the designs of that era. Taking off first was the Shuttleworth Collection's Avro 504K, which gave a brief but somewhat high series of passes before landing. This made way for a pair of Sopwith replicas that were both built by the Northern Aeroplane Workshop. These were the Sopwith Camel F1 and Sopwith Triplane replicas, with the former returning to the display circuit after a few years' absence. The pair flew a series of passes, including a loose formation pass together. Air racing was also covered in the flying programme with the Shuttleworth Collection's most iconic aircraft, the de Havilland DH-88 Comet Grosvenor House. This sleek and powerful racing aircraft is a genuine racing champion, having outright won the Robertson Air Race in 1934, which started at RAF Mildenhall and finished in Melbourne, Australia. The Comet formed a series of fast passes with plenty of topside on show. Next was the Royal Air Force's sole contribution to the flying display, with the Supermarine Spitfire LF-5B from the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight, which has recently returned to the display circuit after an overhaul. It is now painted in the markings of 402 City of Winnipeg Squadron with the code AE-H, which it wore during the D-Day landings. The Spitfire performed a lovely solo display in the clear blue skies and marked another variation of a Rolls-Royce engine in the form of the Merlin 45. The penultimate performance for the afternoon flying display was the incredible Pitts S2SE Special, known as the Jet Pitts, flown by Rich Goodwin. This aircraft is a highly modified Pitts Special, including the addition of 2 AMT-linked turbojets, which massively improves its performance. This was evident during the display, which featured exciting aerobatic manoeuvres, great smoke artistry, and surprisingly enough, jet noise, something not usually associated with aerobatic biplanes. This was absolutely one of the top displays of the day, and this act is one you should seek out at other events if you get the chance. The daytime flying programme was closed by the unique pairing of the BAC Strikemaster Mark 82A and the Supermarine Spitfire T9 from the North Wales Military Aviation Services Limited and Aero Legends. This was the first time this pairing performed at a UK airshow together, and both of these aircraft are making their first appearances at Old Warden. The display saw the pair fly a series of close formation passes in a variety of configurations before splitting at crowd centre. The Strikemaster then concluded this segment with a short solo display. This demonstration also featured another set of aircraft powered by Rolls-Royce engines, with the Spitfire and Strikemaster powered by a Packard Merlin 266 and a Viper Mark 535 respectively. After just over an hour, the evening section of the flying display could begin. This was kicked off with a set piece showcasing the North African campaign of World War II. This campaign was fought between the Allied and Axis powers and took place between the 11th of June 1940 and the 13th of May 1943 in various locations in North Africa including Libya, Egypt, Chad, Algeria, Morocco and Tunisia. The set piece began with the Shuttleworth Collection's Gloucester Gladiator Mark I being chased down by the aircraft restoration company's Hispano-Bouchon, which played the role of a Messerschmitt Bf 109. The duo flew a series of passes including a fairly quick formation pass, which couldn't be held for long due to both fighters having different performances. The Gladiator departed, and it was now the Bouchon's turn to be intercepted, this time by the Fighter Collection's Grumman FM2 Wildcat. The pair flew a series of exciting tail-chasing manoeuvres and concluded with a formation pass of the Bouchon triggering its smoke generator as it had been shot down. The trio then performed their own solo displays, which were all brilliant in the evening light. The show was officially closed by a pair of training biplanes operated by the Shuttleworth Collection. These were the de Havilland DH-82A Tiger Moth II and the Blackburn B2, which appear quite similar to each other but are actually quite different. One of the most noticeable differences is that the Tiger Moth has the conventional tandem seating arrangement, whilst the B2 has side-by-side seating. The pair flew a series of formation passes followed by a gentle tail chase. Obviously, as mentioned earlier, the Shuttleworth Collection's Row 4 triplane replica suffered technical issues that resulted in a crash. I'd like to take this part of the review to commend the Shuttleworth team and the emergency services for their work in recovering the pilot and quickly enabling the visitors to leave safely, as one of the main exits was now inaccessible. The commentator, Ben Donnell, also kept us informed throughout. These incidents are rare but do occasionally occur. Thankfully in this case, no one was harmed. Despite the incident, the Shuttleworth Wings and Wheels Airshow 2026 was a very enjoyable and entertaining affair. It is difficult to say what the top displays were, but my personal favourites were the Spitfire and Strikemaster pair, the jet pits, and the North African campaign set piece. I also really enjoyed the Chipmunk 4-ship display and the barnstorming segment. If you wish to see more of my photos from this event and others, I have linked my Flickr page in the description below. You may also wish to follow me on Instagram, where I post aviation content frequently. My next major show will be the RAF Cosford Airshow 2026, with everything going according to plan. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe if you did, and I hope you will join me in the next one. Bye.